Good afternoon, Johnny Reb Gamers. I'm excited to be doing a new video. This one's going to be on revealing orders, turn sequence number 3, and resolving first fires, turn sequence number 4. Now remember, in turn sequence number 1, we mark all the units with the order chit face down so that the opponent doesn't know what you're doing. And then in turn sequence 2, phase 2, we covered routes, rallies, and replacements. So now in turn 3, turn sequence number 3, we reveal all the order chits. If you're doing a charge, you declare what you're charging. And if there was more than one charge, if the charge was going by itself or supported. So now in turn sequence 3, we have revealed all the orders. So the very first thing that happens in one of the most exciting phases of Johnny Reb is resolve first fires, which is covered on page 34 under order definition and effect, and in more detail the procedure of resolving first fires on page 39 in the rulebook. So the advantage of first fire is, one, that you get a +1 die roll modifier, that is, you add 1 to the die roll, and secondly, that enemy casualties are inflicted immediately upon turn sequence resolving first fires. So if any other units are marked charge, hold, disengage, or formation change, your first fire effects have immediate effect. Now I will mention that if a unit is marked disengage with a D, when you first fire it is half casualties for the disengaging unit. However, you still get the first fire. If both units are marked first fire, then casualties are taken in the same sequence and simultaneously. But there are several advantages to first fire, as I'll demonstrate here. We'll start off from left to right. So the Union Regiment here decided the first fire because they have 16 figures, versus the Confederate unit that has only 12 figures. So a little bit of advantage in the chart column on the back of the Johnny Reb reference sheet. So that's why the Union decided the first fire, because they have a few extra guys. But the Confederates decided to first fire also. So when we roll for that, we'll have simultaneous casualties reflected on this same turn. Now remember very quickly the ranges. At 2 inches, 0 to 2 inches is close range, which gives you an extra dice. 2 to 4 inches is normal range. And then 4 to 6 is long range, where you lose a dice. So if you did not move, for instance, the Union in this position here, if you don't move, normal range you're going to get, close range you're going to get 4 dice to roll. A normal range you're going to get 3 dice to roll, and long range you're going to get 2 dice to roll. Of course, there's other modifiers that can change the die roll, but we won't get into that right now. What we're going to get into is first fires. So in this example here, you have 16 Union troops, figures. They're going to first fire into this Confederate regiment. So because it's within 4 inches of normal range, what you're going to do is roll 3 dice. You're going to look on the combat results table, which you have here. As you can see on the left column, you have figures firing. And as you can see, you have 16 on the chart, along with 12 for the Confederate. At the top, you have the die roll combat results table. But after you roll the dice, you have modifiers that you have to look at, which are all listed right here. You have fire die roll modifiers, for instance, fire marked first fire is a +1. And then you have target die roll modifiers. And on this side is wooden fences and other things that influence plus or minus the unit getting fired at. So in this instance, we have 16 Union troops firing at this Confederate regiment. So on first fire, you look on the column for figures fired, you'd find 16. I rolled an 8 with 3 dice, but it's +1 for first fire, so it's 9. So you cross-index the 12 figures on the chart with the 9, and on this chart, with that roll, you'd have a 1 asterisk. Now in Johnny Reb, the 1 asterisk means that you take 1 die, and if you roll a 4, 5, or 6, you got a hit and took a casualty. If you rolled a 1, 2, or 3, you would not get a hit. And remember, as we learned in the last video about casualties, that you go from left to right. So on this, since they had 1 casualty, you would mark the 1-figure casualty on the Confederate. So let's roll the Confederates. They're in normal range, so we're going to roll 3 dice. Now count all the figures. Since it's simultaneously, they get to use all their figures. So we had a really good roll of 14 plus 1 for first fire is 15. So we have 12 men on the figures firing scale. And we have a roll of 15 altogether with the die roll modifier 1. And that is 3 hits. Again, remember to mark left to right. So in this scenario here, we would have 3 casualties for the Union. 1 for the Confederates, 3 for the Union. And in the Johnny Reb game, in this situation, since both units have their first casualty, both units would have to do a morale check. You do morale checks when you have your first casualty, when you lose a stand, when you see a leader killed, or when a unit is routing. But morale is a different story. Right now we're just doing first fires. And again, one of the reasons the Union decided to fire was because they had more men. But as you can see with die roll, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Moving on to the middle here, you have the Confederate troops that decided the first fire. They're firing on this unit here. One reason I placed it that way is because the Union regiment's down 1 stand. And so you have more men in the Confederates who wanted the first fire. Again, they're in normal range. So you're going to roll 3 dice and add the +1 modifier. So we rolled a 12. +1 makes it 13. You have 12 men. You look on the chart, we're 12 men. You cross-index for a total of 13. And in this situation, you have 2 casualties. So we mark again, left to right. Now, because they already lost a stand, they don't have to check for first casualty. If they had all their stands, this unit would have to check morale because it's the first casualty. And because they're on hold and they first fired, the casualties are immediately put on the hold unit. And so when the holds fire later in the game, anytime after first fire or after movement, they would have 2 less guys to shoot with because the first fire eliminated that. That's the advantage. Now in this situation here, I had this unit choose the first fire because this unit's in disorder. They decided to put a formation change marker on that unit to get themselves back in line. Now, it's long distance because it's 6 inches away, 4 to 6 inches away. So their first fire, they're only going to get 2 dice. So I'm going to roll those 2 dice. Terrible die roll. Let me try that again just for effect. Not much better. Okay, really? Wow, that's super good. So anyways, quite a contrast. So your 2 dice, and then you add +1. We have 12 guys, plus our 12 roll, add 1 for first fire, and that's 13. So look on the 12 figure chart, cross index to 13, and yeah, 2 casualties is much better than when I rolled the snake eyes. So again, on the disordered unit, marking left to right, 2 casualties there. Now, I forgot one thing that I want to mention about just because they're in disorder. You got a +1 for first fire here, but when a unit's in disorder, it's also a +3. So actually I would have added 3 more on the chart from 12, 13, and then so it would have been 16 actually. So with 12 on the column for 16, it wound up being 4 figures instead of 2, which means it would have taken a stand and then a casualty. You can just move a stand over to replace that. So they would be shooting with these less figures when they get to shoot after they form. And oftentimes when you lose a stand, I just set it aside until after the turn, or you can pick it up. In this case, being they lost a stand, they would have to check morale right away. It's pretty much the same for artillery with first fire. You have short canister range, or normal range, or long range. In this instance, if that's a 12-pound Napoleon, the chart's 3 inches for close range, where you can shoot canister or double canister, or normal range is 12 inches, or over 12 inches up to 30 inches long range. So in this case, they're obviously within 12 inches. They were going to shoot here. They're marked first fire. So for the artillery, I'm going to roll 3 dice. They rolled really well. So it's a total of 13 plus 1 for first fire is 14. Now, on the right hand side of the chart is where the artillery sections are, right here. And as you can see, there's 2 men on there, 2 sections, 2 figures. So this is where you go on the chart, right here, on there to 2 sections for cross-indexing. Just like you did for the men on the other side, cross-index here, so 2 section chart here. And we rolled, like I said, a 13 plus 1 is a 14, so 2 sections on a 14 winds up being 1 casualty for the Union. Again, marking left to right. And because it's first casualty, they'd have to make a morale check, and because it's artillery hit, you'd have to do a morale check plus 1. We'll get into morale a little more later. Like I said, this is just about first fire. So that's some of the reasons and some of the advantages of why you want to do first fire and how first fire works. Again, if they're both first firing, casualties are simultaneously. If one unit is first firing against a unit that's not first fire, the unit taking the first fire hits takes casualties immediately, as in this situation here where the first fire was on the formation changing unit. The cannon first fired on them. Now remember, on first fires, you can only shoot at 1 target and 1 target only, usually the most threatening unit in your primary zone or closest in your secondary zone. Now, one important thing is that units that are in disorder and in skirmish cannot use the first fire benefit of 1 die roll modifier. Now, the reason why I put this charge unit here is because there is instances where a unit that first fired may shoot again, and that's in if they're charged. So in this situation right here, because the unit fired on this unit here, this unit can charge, and the unit that already first fired can shoot at the charging unit. However, it's with 1 less die. 1 less die each time. So for instance, if that unit charged once and then this unit chose to charge, you would have first fire. You would have a fire on that unit charging with 1 less die. And then if that unit charged over to this unit, you'd do 2 die you'd be down for firing at that second charge. Now, if this unit had been marked charge, this unit still would have first fired, and the unit charging would have had to take immediate casualties if they got any casualties. However, when they come close into their charge, the impact, because they were the unit already shot with first fire, the first fire unit would not get to fire a second time as they did on the one I just showed you. Again, on the chart, just going back since we're covering firing, over on the left is figures firing. Count up the number of figures that are firing. Over here, it's sections. Each figure is 1 section. And then at the top is the die roll. But before you complete the die roll, after you roll, you're going to add and subtract the modifiers here. Like fire marked first fire is a +1. For fire modifiers, there's modifiers for target die roll modifiers and for other things like behind a fence. For instance, if this unit decided to fire on the one behind the fence, they would get a +1 for first fire, but then a -1 because the unit's behind the fence. So it would equal out. You'd roll 3 dice and you wouldn't have the benefits. So I think we covered that pretty well today. That has to do with first fire. One other thing to take advantage of is if a general is within an inch of a unit, they get a +1 modifier, just like a +1 for first fire. So this unit could take a +1 on the die roll for first fire and a +1 more, so it's +2 total with the general by it. There has been debates between Johnny Reb gamers of whether a general within 1 inch of both units could be used for both units or just one unit. I play it for firing with both units. However, for a charge, either in the charge or leading the charge, you have to have it attached to one unit. But that's my personal preference there. Well, I thank you again. That was turn sequence 3 and 4, reveal orders, and then resolving first fires. Thank you for your time. See you in the next one where we're going to move disengaging units. Oh, before I do that, if in fact a unit was marked disengaged, for example, this unit here, because they have 3 stands only instead of 4, this unit would still be able to first fire on them, but disengaging units only get half casualties. So you get to shoot at them where they're at before they leave, and then being they were disengaging, it's only half casualties. And also, on a side note, if a unit got fired at and they were in skirmish line, it's half casualties to the skirmish line, but that's another story. Have a good day.